Twice the terror.
Welcome to Twice the Terror. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Steven.
Oh, so spooky.
This is my candy dish named Steven. He has no bottom jaw and he holds my Werther's caramels. Thanks, Steven.
Well, I think Steven is completely appropriate because today, Kat, is Halloween.
Ooh.
That's right. This episode is dropping on Halloween. For this year's is our Halloween episode. If you're listening to it late, just pretend. It's still Halloween. It's Halloween.
It's Halloween in my
soul.
heart.
Yeah, exactly. Can never leave. Halloween will always be in here and in your brain as well. Or just listen whenever. It doesn't really matter. But that being said, this is our Halloween episode. And for anybody out there who maybe doesn't know what Twice the Terror is, the way that this podcast works is that each week Kat and I bring a topic to discuss. We just kind of go back and forth talking about whatever it is. It might be something spooky. It might be something real. It might be something fictional. But whatever it is, we try to make it as entertaining as we possibly can. Kat, what are we talking about on this very special Halloween episode?
Well, if any of you remember, there was a point in time, back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, all of us had a collective fever dream about a movie called Cry Baby Lane that was shown on Snick. We thought it disappeared. Turns out this movie was real. Ryan found it, and we watched it together, and I have feelings about it.
That is exactly it. Yeah, if anybody doesn't know, what we're talking about this week is the movie Cry Baby Lane. This is a fascinating film. There's a lot of history to it. If you've never heard about it, don't worry. We'll go into some of the details. I will say, before we get too far into this episode, and I hate doing this because I hate plugging other things I've worked on, but if you want a really detailed overview of this movie, of the history of this movie, all that stuff, definitely check out my other channel, which has a show I do called Fright Films. I will link the episode of Fright Films about Cry Baby Lane in the description of this episode, because this here is going to be more of a free-form discussion. We will dive into some of the history and, some of the aspects, but if you want a more detailed kind of like, point-for-point description of what's happening, check out that other video. And
Ryan came with information. I came with Ohio jokes. That's how this podcast works.
But you know what? It's what this show needs. It needs a little bit of that, A little bit of...
I feel like a whole new person because I got my hair done and my nails done this week, and it's like, new bitch, who dis? I keep putting my hands in the camera, just like, in case you haven't noticed, everyone, I no longer look like a fucking swamp hag.
But to be fair, I've been doing that a lot too. Like, I was doing hand gestures. Well, if you only listen to the show and you don't watch the audio version, you're missing out on all these
so much
sweet things that we're doing for this episode.
We're making up for the fact that we don't have the budget of shows like Bone Chillers where we can have lightning flashes every
we don't even
seconds.
have the budget of Cry Baby Lane. I mean, let's be honest. We don't have anything, folks, but you can change all that. Just $1 a month will get you In the Arms of an Angel.
For 50 cents a day, you can help feed 2 starving artists who like to talk about really niche bullshit.
Not true. We don't have any source of income at the moment. But if you like the show, you could definitely check us out. Just subscribe and keep listening.
Ask me for my Venmo. I'll just give it to you. Shit.
We're already way off the rails in this episode. But
I have feet pics if you want them. I'm kidding.
That Twice the Terror wiki feed that everyone's clamoring for.
I'll take those piggies to market. I don't give a shit.
Make it rain. People, just give us money. Just give us money, people.
We'll stop all of this if you just give us money.
Trust me, folks, you don't want to see my feet on WikiFeet. That's just, nobody wants that. They would be paying me to take them off WikiFeet at that point. Now it makes it sound like I got like Hobbit feet or something.
It's not like I have Hobbit feet, but like maybe I shouldn't describe it too much, or maybe we will get one fan we really don't want.
Just that one person that's just like,
You guys got hobbit feet. Mr. Frodo.
That's Elizabeth in the comments. Shout out to our number one fan, Elizabeth. You're my favorite person on earth. Thank you.
now that we're kind of, let's get this train,
Back
let's
on.
kind of like, everyone lean to the left. Let's get it back on the rails. It's back on. Okay. Choo-choo. Do we want to start by, kind of diving into the plot of Crybaby Lane?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's give a little synopsis moment here.
Also, I know we talked about it in other episodes, but if you have not watched Crybaby Lane, you have no idea what the hell we're talking about, and you're curious, it's free everywhere. It's a movie that Nickelodeon doesn't really seem to care about, so it's free on YouTube. It's on Internet Archive. Like, it's all over the place. You can find different versions of it. Just search Crybaby Lane. I'm sure you'll find one of them. My favorite is the original airing from October 28th, 2000, where Melissa Joan Hart was hosting it. It even starts with like an intro with her, and if you watch the version with commercials actually in it still, there's like little in-betweens with her and Salem the cat and like all this stuff too. So it just brings you back to that very late 90s, early 2000s like time period for sure. And everyone knows we are big fans of that. But Kat, do you want to break down the plot? Now, also another thing, this is Kat's first time seeing this.
It is.
She'd never heard of it or anything.
I missed it. I wasn't part of the collective, like, when we all took Benadryl at the same time right before bedtime. Like, I missed it.
You guys see Crybaby Lane?
No, I was too busy watching trash like Hangman's Curse, which is a movie. I don't know if you've seen it, but
No.
I should.
Oh,
make
you
you
told
watch
me about this.
Yeah,
Isn't
I
it
should make you watch that shit. Okay, so I missed out on Crybaby Lane because I was watching ABC Family, the artist formerly known as ABC Family, instead of Snick that night. So I got to see Crybaby Lane for the first time. So I'm going to do my best to explain this.
Okay, I'll fill in any
Yeah.
gaps. But let's go ahead, Kat.
You're
Let's
like
fill-
my support here. Okay. So I'm setting the scene. It's the year 2000. It's Ohio. How do I know it's Ohio? Because there is a part, it does have very great fall vibes. When you said that this movie just really emulates the feeling of fall very well, you're 100% right. Because the trees, I mean, around Halloween where I grew up, the trees were mostly almost naked at this point. There's leaves everywhere. Kids were wearing winter coats.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember having to be like, your Halloween costume was always ruined in Ohio because you had to wear your snow coat, like your winter coat over it. Hugely disappointing. This is just me complaining now, but there was one year I went as Morticia Addams for Halloween and it was too cold and my mom gave me her sweatshirt, so I was Morticia Addams in a Steelers sweatshirt.
Oh no. Yeah, I have heard horror stories of this before. It's one of the good things about growing up in California is your falls weren't quite as enjoyable. Don't get me wrong. You still had the cold chills, you got the rain, you got the leaves changing, but it's not quite as intense. But but that all being said, you did always get to wear your costume in the proper way. I don't remember ever having to wear like a coat.
We never
or
did.
anything.
So privilege. I'm gonna the part that
So,
really
bro, did you wear your Halloween costume?
everyone's Bill and Ted for Halloween.
Everyone in California just is like,
Talks like that.
Yeah, everybody does. Clearly, I'm masking my true accent right now. It's such a struggle when I really just want to be talking like,
Did you guys go to In-N-Out and get the double anima style?
I'll give you money just to talk like that for every episode for my own weird enjoyment. The part that really sold it for me that this is Ohio in fall though was when I saw a guy driving a harvester through a cornfield and I was like, oh yeah. This is
that dead cornfield is just so. And people at this point would, if you follow the podcast, if this is not your first episode, if it is, welcome. But if it's not, you probably heard our last episode, which was talking about the different movies Halloween season movies we like.
Yeah.
And honestly, this movie and Halloween 4 are like the two movies that I think get that fall feeling better than any other movie. Like, say what you will about the rest of this movie, but if you want something that feels like fall and is cozy and is just like, a lot of it's shot at night, but even the daytime shots have that kind of like, you can tell there's a chill in the air, and it's just kind of like everything's just kind of dead. And I know this sounds really dumb, but the sky just looks different in fall.
It does.
You know what
No,
I mean?
it's great. And I think like an October sky is like that more gray blue,
Yeah.
and you can feel it. It's a palpable difference.
Yeah.
And this movie does a really great job of like actually getting that. That being said, the story opens with these two kids hanging out with their best friend.
I
The
thought you were
local
about to
mortician.
say, like, that being said, the story is shit.
Yeah. The story is ass.
I'm sorry. Please continue.
Yeah, it's two small children and their good friend, a grown man, who's the local mortician.
Well, it's weird when you say it like that, but I mean, it is kind of weird. It's weird in the movie, but it's movie logic, right? It's that
in
thing
movie
where,
logic,
like,
yeah. He
kids
also
in movies have like an adult mentor that they hang out with and stuff. In real life, you'd be like, get that person away from them. That is like, but in the movies, it's like, okay, yeah, they go and they visit the local mortician.
He also appears to be a hobby taxidermist, which I found really interesting. So he's telling them a ghost story, and I guess a ghost story, but just more like a spooky urban legend about their town. And as he's telling the story, we're getting a lot of really great shots of like this dilapidated house that's like broken floorboards, broken windows. There's like a stuffed animal, like a teddy bear that's sort of ripped up and stuffing's coming out of it. Essentially, the story is about two conjoined twins where one twin is evil and one twin is good. The twins get sick and it affects their liver, which they share. And the parents are like, well, we got to separate the twins so that, and the sound that, girl, the clip is like literally of a saw, and the sound is of a saw like going through a log. I'm like, who's sawing these kids in half?
Yeah, it's
Why
like
do
a
they-
hacksaw that they show in the shot. And
It's like,
it's
like
it's one of those things. This is, and I don't mean to interrupt, but this is a good point to actually talk about a little bit of the history with this movie too, because this is a movie that got showed once, October 28th, 2000. And Nickelodeon never showed it again. Which, if you grew up with Nickelodeon like we did, you know they showed Halloween when it was Halloween season. Shit was on repeat. Like it was like over and over. You saw stuff.
Doug's Halloween episode, the Rugrats Halloween
Yeah.
episode, like over and over and over again.
Yeah, constantly. And so, and just in general, you know, that's how you get a network. Is you back in the day, you would show stuff on repeat, not like giant blocks. You would show like episodes on repeat. And so, this movie aired once and then never aired again. Up until over a decade later. Because what happened was in 2011, people on Reddit started being like, wait, does anybody else remember this? Does anybody else remember this weird Nickelodeon movie that aired about these conjoined twins, and it was like really spooky and all this stuff? And it started to spiral, and it got to a point where people soon were like searching for it, and it was lost media, and people were trying to figure out if this is real. Was it a fever dream?
Yeah.
Finally, somebody found a recording of it. They're like, I have it. They had a buried TV recording on VHS, which they then uploaded to prove that the movie did exist. And it became so popular that Nickelodeon, unprompted, on their second channel, Teen Nick, started this block in 2011, I believe, called The 90s or All That. It eventually became like Nick Splat and The Splat. But basically, it was their kind of version of Adult Swim, where they started showing classic 90s Nickelodeon shows aimed at people our age, right? So it was like late at night from like 10 or 11 to like 6 in the morning, and it was like those same kind of like Adult Swim hours. And so unprompted one day, after the popularity of this, there is a recording of this version that even says it's supposed to be playing Keenan and Kel, and they showed
And it's
Crybaby
not
Lane.
Keenan and Kel.
No, they showed this. And so
Shout out
and
to
then-
that intern.
right, the person who was like paying attention to like people finding this. And they even played into it they did it for a few years, but they started to play into it around Halloween time, like the movie that was banned, you know.
And it was never banned. It was all like a marketing thing to like get you to watch it.
But I think total they only showed it like 4 times or something. Like, it was not a lot of times after that, and then they stopped showing it, and then eventually that block went away. Anyway, it's such a weird thing. A lot of people speculated. I don't think this has ever been proven, but a lot of people started to speculate that they were getting angry parent letters. Nickelodeon was getting angry letters for this being too scary. And so that's why they never showed it again. Because, to be fair, that intro, which really impacted people, is probably the most scary part of the movie.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
that intro is creepy, and it's weird, and it's
Because they're
dark. And
talking about 2 conjoined twins being sawed in half.
yeah.
You know?
And then on top of that, it's like black and white, and it's got weird footage, and almost looks like Eraserhead or some sort of like weird, it's very perfectly ghost story-ish. It's exactly the type of mood you want to set with a movie like this. And what has come out later was the director, Peter Lauer, basically did an interview after it blew up again, and he was like, I just thought Nickelodeon didn't like it, so they never showed it again. Which, look, this is a network that has not always had the best shows. I don't want to call it any shows because I know every show has its fans, but there's some crap that has aired on Nickelodeon, at a certain point. You're telling me that they didn't like this movie so much they wouldn't just air it to kill an hour-and-a-half block? Like, of course they would. And also on top of that, like, I think, I can't remember for sure, but I believe there's an article or something where they interviewed like a Nickelodeon representative, and he just said the movie was forgotten. But again, that feels so weird because the budget of the film was $800,000, which is a small amount for what they originally wanted the movie to be, which we'll talk about later. But that's still, Nickelodeon spent $800,000 on this movie. They would probably show it again and again and again. So
if you spend money on something, you're going to use it.
Yeah. So there's really no official reason why it wasn't shown for 11 years after that. Like, it just wasn't shown. And a lot of people, like I said, speculated that maybe it was the content of it. But really, besides that opening scene, I don't think
there's not really that much like too terrifying about it.
There's nothing more than like what was on par with like Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps or other things around that time. Like, there's some stakes in the film, like in terms of like there's some the whole.
You think someone dies at one point?
Yeah,
and,
yeah. I was trying not to like. Not that it matters, but hopefully, if you're listening to this, you've seen it. But there's some danger that happens. Like you said, you think some people die, and like there's some like destructive elements. People burning down a boat and things like that. But nothing. I mean, look, Ghastly Grinner and Dead Man's Float, and like there's a lot more terrifying. Night Shift, there's a lot more terrifying Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes than there are than this movie in particular. But so anyway, but we cut to
he tells a story about the conjoined twins that get separated and they die. They don't really specify when, and there's a reason why I say that. They don't say whether they die as children or as adults, but they die. But it is believed that you can hear one of the twins, if you go to, quote, Crybaby Lane, you can hear that baby crying as you get closer to their old house. So he ends this urban legend, this ghost story for these kids, and our main character, who I believe his name is Andrew.
Andrew, yeah. So Andrew. You have in the scene, you've got Mr. Bennett, who's the funeral the mortician, telling them this story. You've got Andrew, who's the main character, the younger brother to Carl.
The most fucking prickish dick bag. The back of this kid's head is so fucking smackable.
Carl is a total just jackass. He's
a fucking chode. Like, so he ends this story. Mr. Bennett ends the story, and our hero, Andrew, goes, "No way."
Well, also on top of that, something to point out is supposedly the good son was buried in the cemetery, the local cemetery. The bad son was the one that was buried out in like a field out on Crybaby Lane.
Right. Also, quick mention that the nephew of Mr. Bennett pokes his head in at one point at this time, and he looks like the love child of Oz Perkins and Richard Keel, which is the most niche reference I'm ever going to make. And yeah, like he's like his mortuary assistant, and it kind of gives you the vibe that Mr. Bennett isn't very concerned about how things are ran at his business.
Yes. He says later on in the film that he's a better taxidermist than he is a mortician, which is, you know, saying something. There's a lot of moments throughout the movie where he's like either apologizing for something we really don't know or something doesn't go right, and he's like, oh, I did the best I could. He doesn't seem like he's very good at his job. So
the kids leave and they head home, and Andrew then has a nightmare about Crybaby Lane, where he wakes up and again he says, "No way." I was like, this is this kid's whole lines, this whole movie.
Well, on top of that too, there is a great title sequence with them riding their bikes, which sets that fall feel. But it's also, I know some people don't dig this kind of music, but I love the music of this movie, where it's kind of this like almost semi-surf rock, rockabilly, like sort of like, and it's almost got like, it's not quite a theremin, it's more like guitar-y, but it's kind of emulating that sort of sound.
Yeah.
It's just like, you know, it also reminds me almost of like the theme song to the Munsters, which has that same kind of like vibe going for it. And I just love it. Like it makes me, it's this kind of like spooky, but not like typical spooky music. It just, again, with that backdrop of fall in Ohio, where they filmed, well, most of the film was shot in New Jersey, but they did spend a day in Ohio filming the town to
and they milked the shit out of Ohio, man. They really got it.
Yeah.
So, the kid's now scared of this, and if I remember correctly, the mom gets very upset with Carl for taking Andrew to Mr. Bennett's to hear these stories, because she's like, you know how these stories upset him, and Carl probably just made like the jerking off motion at her. I don't remember.
Well, at one point he just rips one. It's the worst fart joke. Like, look, fart jokes can be solid if staged properly. But later on, there's a moment where he says something like, it was probably just the wind. And then I think Andrew says something like, it wasn't the wind. And then Carl just lifts his leg and rips a fart. And is just like, well, that was. It just tells you everything you need to know about this character. He's got wrestlers on his wall. And he's one of those guys that's like, way too into wrestling, not like
he's like,
not
if
like
you want to be the
fun.
cream of the crop, like he almost sounds like Macho Man Randy Savage at some points, where he's like, if you really want to be one of the alphas of the pack, and like he sounds like a shitty alpha hole podcaster, like you're either born with greatness or, you know, that kind of shit.
So that's Carl. It sets everything up you need to know about him. He's just the worst.
We are introduced to these girls that know Carl and Andrew, and Carl's like, hey, why don't we go have a seance at the cemetery? And they just pick a random grave. Just a random grave to have this seance at. And, you know, he has like, he plays a prank where he has a recorder somewhere hidden behind another tombstone to play spooky noises to try and like scare the girls. And what they don't know, they accidentally picked the correct grave, and they got one of the twins.
Dun, dun, dun. So then we start cutting to after all this, and there's more to this that we'll discover that gets a little convoluted, but we start seeing like glowing worms coming up from out of the ground, and then hearing this like laugh, like and you start hearing that, and then they cut to a dog that starts having glowing eyes, like the Goosebumps dog. Like it literally is like bump 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 bump. Like it might as well be the same thing from the Goosebumps intro. And after that, I think we have the scene where, is it immediately followed by the scene with Mr. Bennett, where he goes to meet the guy who's digging the graves, who's then sleeping in the backhoe?
Yeah, there's a guy sleeping in a bulldozer.
Yeah.
Which is totally normal. I'm not really sure what this guy's bag is.
This guy...
I'm so in the weeds about this guy.
He finds every way he can to avoid doing the one task he has, which is digging graves. He's
Yeah.
sleeping during the day. He fakes an injury later, and then is like having like what seems like he's setting up for a date with somebody
Yeah.
we never see, with like every country song imaginable wrapped up into one song.
My beer died and my truck left me. Yeah, this weird grifter guy just doesn't want to do anything.
He goes there and the dog starts attacking them.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, they
dog
go-
that was like with the glowing eyes, which they said is like a friendly dog, and then it starts like trying to attack them.
Yeah.
So that gives Bennett the idea that something weird is going on. And then we start seeing scenes of more and more of these townspeople getting affected by whatever this evil is.
Yeah, so we see that group of girls again, and this is one of the other signs to me that this movie took place in Ohio, because I saw a group of girls walking, and one of them was just carrying a full 2-liter of Coke.
Yeah.
I had
Which does
never,
come into play. I mean, I
does.
didn't
There's
even
a purpose.
notice it.
But
I think I mean, it kind of makes sense. They're having like a Girl Scout meeting. So
Yeah.
I think they're bringing like, beverages and snacks and stuff like that. But
kids walking along a highway carrying 2 liters of soda is a very, like, I've seen that in my hometown. I had a friend who did that one time. He was coming to my house for a fire, and he just walked halfway across town down a highway carrying 2 liters of Mountain Dew, which he drank by himself.
God, so
point
much
that out.
caffeine. Just like
It was so bad for you, man.
Yeah.
It was so bad for him. But his choice. So yeah, they're walking, and these girls suddenly become possessed, and that little whore just like yeeted that 2-liter of Coke at a trucker, like hits the windshield of this guy's truck, and he like crashes off the road.
Yeah. And then we start seeing more and more like weird stuff like that happen. Like the mailman is like smashing mailboxes and stuff. Andrew has a crush on one of the girls.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to, if I remember correctly, get out of the house to go see her, because his mom's like helicopter parenting, like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you shouldn't go over there, blah blah blah. And so they sneak out. So Carl's going with him, and Carl's like, trying to basically like encourage him in the worst way possible. He's like, "You're the man," stuff.
Yeah.
And Carl then runs in his bike in front of a speeding train. And Andrew is trying to like catch up and almost gets hit by the train.
Yeah, almost kills his brother, which I would like you to know, dear audience of ours, Andrew is not a brave hero. He is a reluctant hero, if anything. This is a 12-year-old possessed by the spirit of a 30-year-old millennial. This kid has seen some shit. Like, he's at the breakfast table talking to his mom about his anxiety, and he's like, why do I gotta be like this? Like, he's legit being like, I don't want to be doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, it's true. He's more self-aware than any other character probably in the movie.
Exactly.
And yeah.
Almost gets his brother killed as they go to like see these girls.
Well, that's what happens is Carl then gets sucked under the ground, and we get our first kind of shadowy glimpse of the twin. And it's very... I've seen this movie many times. Like I said, I have a soft spot for this movie, despite the fact that I don't think it's a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination. I just enjoy it. But one thing that has always confused me is, again, that the opening doesn't make mention of how old these twins were when they died. But the idea is that you get the implication that they were younger.
They're babies. Because, like, the
And-
whole, like, torn up teddy bear in the beginning.
Right. And then you hear the crying of the baby, right, at Crybaby Lane. However, when you go underground, we're talking like a
This
grown
dude,
ass
20.
man.
This fucker's paying taxes. He's an
Like,
adult.
He looks like a mix of a Paul Rubens character with
Yeah.
the boogeyman from Don't Look Under the Bed. Like, he's like this weird sort of, and he's like got worms in his hand. He's like
eating
eating
bugs
them
and
and
shit.
stuff. And so we see that. And it's still confusing. It's like, okay, so either they weren't kids when they died, or they became adults in spirit, or maybe it doesn't matter. Just turn off your brain. It doesn't matter. So Carl then gets kind of possessed. And Carl leads Andrew. I think this is when we get to the scene with the hazing, right? Like the stuff the horrible pranks that you would never do.
This shit is wild. So like, okay. This teenager, this little fucking crotch goblin bastard chases his brother into a barn, essentially, and he shoves him into a pile of manure. And what I want to point out, okay, I have been on many farms. Manure, for the most part, in this instance, is pretty dry. It's gross, but it's pretty dry. This was a sopping wet pile of dung that this kid fell into.
Maybe let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's mud and manure. Maybe there's like a hole in the farm and it's been raining. Who knows?
So Andrew, clearly upset, strips naked. Not naked. He was in his underwear.
Yeah.
He was in his tidy whities. Which I was shocked because this is the second time now in the movie this kid has been harassed while naked.
Yeah, the first time is after Carl gets blamed. Andrew's like showering and Carl like sits on the toilet and flushes the toilet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Andrew's like screaming and jumps out of the shower in his towel. But now he's in his tidy whities, and Carl and all these girls come in and they start pelting Andrew with more poop. And I was like
poop and like old food and like rocks and like just whatever they have. They're
it was
just, like, pelting
heinous.
Andrew.
This is a fucking crime.
Now, to be fair, they are supposed to be possessed at this point. Like they're possessed by the evil spirit. That being said, you would still, I mean, that would never happen in a kids made for TV kids movie.
And I could see parents being upset about that scene.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Because it only escalates. Eventually, Carl and the girls leave, but they release a bowl in this, because it's in like a chute, right? It's in like a bowl chute. And they release this bowl that starts charging at Andrew, trying to kill him.
Yeah.
And
he gets saved at the last second by
like a farmer. The guy was just like, what are you doing here? And like grabs him. So Andrew's like running through the countryside trying to like find clothes. He gets to like a clothesline. He grabs like some clothes. And that's when we see the shot of like the fisherman hunter looking dudes.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting because okay. Hear me out. There are lakes in Ohio. I know, I've been there. I'm from there. But Ohio is a landlocked state. And there's just a shit ton of fishermen out there. And I was like, there were more hunters than there are fishermen that I know. So I was a little like, a lot of boats.
I was going to say, other than the fact that they have a boat, to be fair, they could just be outdoorsmen. You know what I mean? Like, they're not like, it's not like they've got like fishing gear. Like, they've got like a hat with like fishing lures.
I thought one guy had one. I'm pretty sure one guy had, but like, don't listen to me. You watch this movie every year. I'm new in town.
You might be right. I'll have to go, but they're definitely like drinking beer, and all of a sudden as Andrew watches, they light the boat on fire and like watch it burn. We get our first shot of somebody who's like possessed. We get a close up on them with like glowing white eyes, which is the other big thing everyone remembered from this movie. Like they remember the story of the twins and like them getting sawed in half, and they remember people with like glowing white eyes. Yeah. Became a very iconic shot, especially later on. The same thing happens with Carl when we're jumping a little bit ahead, but he goes to find Andrew after he's been possessed, and he thinks Andrew's taking another shower, and there's a shot of Carl wiping the mirror, and you just see his eyes glowing. Like that shot became very iconic for a lot of people.
Always when he's naked. Poor kid. See, Andrew's freaking out because these guys just lit a boat on fire, and now they're chasing him.
Yeah, so he gets out of there, and eventually he gets to like Bennett, tells him like what's going on. And Bennett tells him that he thinks, because he asked him about the seance and everything, and he thinks what happened is they ended up at the real grave. And he tells Carl the story that is, and we might be jumping around a little bit, but just to get to the plot points, he basically tells Andrew that what happened was he was the one who separated the twins, Bennett was, and he made a mistake and buried them in the wrong areas. So the good kid is actually the one in Crybaby Lane. The bad,
he is not the
one.
best character, like Undertaker.
No. And there's actually a really good scene. Again, like people can say what they want about this movie. I do think there's a great scene where it's right after that, and Andrew's kind of like, you were telling me one story, you're telling me another. Like, why even bother telling me these stories? And Bennett kind of like snaps at him and is like, it's because you like ghost stories, right? That's the only reason you and your brother come around. And it becomes clear that like Bennett's kind of like,
you feel bad, he's lonely, and people are probably kind of scared of him because he's the Undertaker, and these kids want to hang out with him, and he's like, well, this is the most social interaction I'm getting, and this is what the kids want to hear, so I'm going to tell them.
right. Which, by the way, that actor playing that is Frank Langella. But did you ever read who the director wanted for that role originally?
No. Who?
Tom Waits.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
The director wanted Tom Waits to play Mr. Bennett, which is so... What a interesting choice. And then I guess, I don't know who, if it was Nickelodeon or they couldn't afford Tom Waits or what, but they were like, nah. And they got Frank Langella.
All I can get you is Frank Langella, right?
But so anyway.
Yeah.
So eventually Bennett goes to weird guy who doesn't want to work, gravedigger guy. He talks about something being bad luck earlier in the movie, the gravedigger does. And eventually what he tells him is that there's a root that grows from the body, supposedly.
The
and
heart of the person in the grave.
Yeah, and so it's bad luck to cut this root. That it is like superstition, because supposedly when you do, it releases the soul.
Spirit.
And
spirit. Apparently Andrew did that when he pulled up some weeds when he was at the grave.
Yeah, when him and Carl were setting up, they moved some weeds. Apparently they did that, which started causing like all this chaos and everything. Eventually Bennett gets knocked out by a character we haven't even discussed yet, who's like...
Because honestly, I'm so confused about this kid. Like,
he's a weird little kid who they hang out with, but who's clearly like several years younger than them.
Yeah, he's like half the age of Andrew.
Yeah.
And he's obsessed with Lord of the Rings. Like, he's obsessed with The Hobbit. So he's hanging out what he calls his Hobbit hole, and he has like an orc sword.
Which is one of those cool, they basically have one of those cool, only you would see in movies, clubhouses in the middle of nowhere where they've found like old pieces of metal and like wood and like built it. And it's like, kid, at least nobody I knew ever actually did that, but it's always a cool thing to see. But anyway, so that kid gets possessed, hits Bennett with his lightsaber while quoting Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Causes Bennett to fall over, hit his head, he gets knocked out. Andrew then, and basically Bennett is also told Andrew not to be around Carl. And, Andrew's mom is upset. She finds him and is like, stay away from my kids, blah, blah, blah.
And Mr. Bennett's like, listen, I'm so sorry about what happened with your mother.
Yes.
The only thing I feel like the mom character was great. I thought she was a great actress. I thought she did the part well. The only thing I wish is that she did go a little bit more Ohio with it. It was like cigarette mom style. She's like, listen, you start this with me one more time, I ain't gonna let my kids come around you. Now get in the car. We're gonna go down the Walmarts. Like,
it's definitely, they're portraying it as more like middle America, just kind of like everyday suburbia, but like a lot of the shots are more like farm, rural. So interesting.
I just really wanted her to be like, stop talking to my kids,
Carl apologizes, even though he's possessed, blah, blah, blah. And then we get the scene where he's trying to find Andrew. We get the shot of him wiping the mirror, and then we find out Andrew has escaped. He goes back to Bennett, finds Bennett unconscious, and that's when he meets up and teams up with Kenneth, who is Bennett's nephew. And we have a very crazy scene where Kenneth apparently says he has a driver's license, but then doesn't have a driver's license. They're driving a hearse, being chased by a cop car with a possessed cop, like this crazy, like, because basically what they find out is that they have to remove the root. Like, the root was cut, and so to like basically stop all the madness, they have to pull the root from the chest of the body or whatever.
Yeah. And
eventually they get attacked by a what do you even call it? like a thresher, like one of those like farm equipment machines. That's what ends up destroying the hearse, because there's the farmer with the giant.
Okay, does it have like spikes that kind of go in a spiral? This sounds crazy.
I think it does, but it also, it almost has like a forklift element to it too. So maybe it's not a thresher, but it's some sort of giant farm equipment.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, whatever it is, doesn't matter. You think Kenneth is dead.
Yeah, it hits
Andrew's-
the hearse, and Kenneth was like in the driver's seat, and he ducks down, and then this thing like crashes through the window and basically takes off almost the top of the vehicle, and you're like, shit, they just done killed that boy.
Yeah, and so after that, we have a very odd scene, and the movie kind of starts falling apart a little bit for me at this point. Like this is where
This is when I started really enjoying it. 'Cause
It's really wacky and weird, but it also like it in terms of like after Kenneth starts being more wacky, because you think he's kind of creepy at the beginning.
yeah, he's scary, but then you find out he's just a himbo. He's just like a lovable
Yeah.
idiot.
There's something off about him, like he's just kind of like, you know, dumb or just awkward or something.
Yeah.
We don't really know exactly what the character's deal is, what they were kind of going for. But Andrew ends up in a cornfield, and like all the Girl Scout girls and like the friends of
Just
that
walk
Andrew
out
and
like
Carl-
fembots. Like they all like
Yes.
step out, literally Austin Powers fembot style, and they're like, and this is I said when we were watching the movie, because we watched it together, and I was like, these bitches look like straight up fembots, and you start laughing, and the one's like, do you want to kiss me, Andrew? I'm like, these bitches are fembots. Like,
yeah,
is
yeah.
it.
They're basically like they say the line, it's either "kiss me" or "chi chi" is the line that they keep saying. And you're like,
Yeah.
what? And there's a great shot where a girl, Andrew is finally like, "Fine, I'll kiss you," and he goes in for a kiss, and then the girl sticks out her tongue. There's a spider that crawls.
yeah, and it
off
crawls
her
out of their
tongue.
mouths, and it's gross.
But then they're like, okay, then it's Chi Chi. And he's like, what's Chi Chi? And then all it is they have like a big, like, more like muscular, tall Girl Scout who comes out and is going to like beat him up. And it's just such a weird scene. I'm just like,
It's like Death by
add
Snoo
anything-
Snoo shit.
That's what I was going to say. It always reminds me of Futurama. And I'm like, what the hell is happening with this scene? So eventually, but because it doesn't even ultimately matter, Andrew gets sucked into the grave of the evil
twin.
Even though
And he's
he
just in
went
there like,
out-
blah, 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 like eating up his little worms and shit.
yeah, and they're trying to get to Crybaby Lane. That's the weird thing, right? Is he tells him he has to pull it from the Crybaby Lane, but that doesn't make sense because the route is of the evil one, right?
Yeah.
So why did it gets a little convoluted, because then you're like, okay, so you got to pull the route of the is it supposed to be the good twin and we're freeing them, or are we pulling it from the evil twin to stop the evil, but he's already been released because it's been cut, and Andrew's going to Crybaby Lane, but then he gets just teleported to the grave of the evil one, which is supposed to be in the cemetery anyway. So why it gets look, I've seen this movie many times, and I still don't exactly know what happens at the end.
Well, you should. No,
I know, right? I should, but it is
you're
just like,
responsible for this movie.
I don't know. Okay, I think my guess is that like the idea is to go out to Crybaby Lane to free the good kid, and then he
Yeah.
ends up ending up at the cemetery, so he pulls the route to get rid of the bad one or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Ultimately, he ends up in the grave of the evil one who's like eating worms. He's like, "Do you want to be part of my collection?" And he's like gonna like possess Andrew with his glowing eyes. But then Andrew like gets away from him, crawls into this grave, and
Pulls
there's
the
the
root.
skeleton of
Yeah.
the evil one, I'm assuming. And he pulls the root. Everything goes away. He saves the day. Wakes up out, even though like rocks are tumbling on him. He wakes up. Everything's okay. Grass is green. The vines are growing flowers, which he gives to the girl he likes. He meets
Yeah.
up with Carl. They have a sort of heart to heart, even though Carl's still kind of a jerk in the moment. But
Yeah, he like
whatever.
apologizes, and he's like, "If you tell anyone I apologize to you, I'm gonna rip off your balls or something like that." Like some shitty,
Yeah.
smarmy asshole comment.
And the movie ends with Andrew and his now, I guess, girlfriend listening to Bennett talk. And, you know, Bennett's like, "Oh, where's Carl?" He's like, "I think he's had enough stories for a while." And then Carl is hanging out with Hobbit Kid. And then the camera pans down into the ground, and you hear the evil twin like, and then that's the end. And then it
Sounds
cuts to
like Donnie
credits.
from Wild
With
Thornberries.
Wild Thornberries. Yeah.
That shit.
We've kind of bounced around a little bit, but you've actually done more detail than I thought. That is the gist of Crybaby Lane. That's the entire plot of Crybaby
That
Lane.
there, my friends, is the lane of babies crying.
Yes. So again, it's such a weird movie. Originally, it was pitched that Peter Lauer, the director and I believe writer as well, had pitched it to Nickelodeon and stuff because he worked on Pete and Pete. He actually directed a bunch of episodes of Pete and Pete, but the Halloween-y episode is the one that I think most feels like this. It's that same kind of fall vibe, and it just gets fall right. But this is a movie he pitched. I think it was supposed to be a couple million. Like, they were supposed to do like a theatrical movie, and eventually Nickelodeon was like, all right, we'll make it, but we're going to cut the budget, and it's a TV movie of $800,000. So they had to cut some scenes out. I think most of the script stayed intact. There was a scene with like an old man's head like on a dog's body or something.
I don't know how
like,
they were
weird.
going to fit that part in.
I don't know if it was another dream sequence or what, but that was pretty much it. They went and shot the movie in like, I think like 20 days or something. Like, it wasn't like a long shoot. Obviously they didn't have the world's biggest budget. They made the movie. It aired the one time and then disappeared for over a decade. And people finally started discovering it again and, appreciating it. And I think, again, a lot of people have memories of it. I had memories of it too. And when I started hearing about this, I was like, holy shit, I do remember this weird thing. I remember specifically like racing home. We were out somewhere with my parents. I remember like being like, I need to get home because I really wanted to watch this. And then I forgot about it. Like, it's just, once you only see something once, it's just kind of becomes something in your memory. I like I said, flaws and all, I genuinely enjoyed this movie, but I think some people watch it and they're underwhelmed because they had these ideas that it was some terrifying, movie from their childhood that made an impact. And that's partly true, but then when you see what it actually is, it loses a lot of that kind of fear, I think, for a lot of people. But Kat, as a first-time viewer, what was kind of your overall takeaway of Crybaby Lane? Did you like it? Did you not like it?
Well, I would say that if I was a child watching it again, I would have been equally as obsessed with this movie. I didn't hate it. I did not hate it. I would watch it again. I feel like it's something. It's like it would be fun to put on if this makes sense. You ever like have a movie you want to put on at a party?
Oh yeah.
And just like see if people notice what the hell's going on. I think it'd be fun for that. I wish I wish Nickelodeon would have done more with this movie.
Yeah, it's so weird that it kind of gotten forgotten, and it doesn't have any physical media release.
It wasn't poorly produced. It wasn't badly made. Like I said, the opening sequence was very well done with the black and white, and it had a great job. Like, it did a great job of setting the scene. I thought the characters were very memorable and funny.
Yeah. You think they would have done something like with the 20th anniversary, right? It became such a big thing and they aired it a couple more times. Why not just put out... It's not that expensive to produce DVDs. Or even if they just did it the way that they did a lot of their DVDs through Amazon, where it was like made to order. So they're not like making all these DVDs and not shipping them. Just put it out there for people to see. I mean, yeah, it's out on YouTube and stuff, but like even the better quality versions are still not great quality. You want like... slap a director's commentary on there,
Yeah, if you're watching this shit on YouTube, it's in 480p.
Yeah, if that. I think the original version is like 360p. Like it's gotten better with people, upscaling it and stuff. But yeah, it's not high quality. And
like, what are you scared of? Just show us the fucking movie. It's fine.
And if anything, I mean, Nickelodeon. And even Paramount, the Viacom and Paramount, the people that own Nickelodeon, there's money to be made in horror, right. Like especially like kids horror, like even shit that people don't, there's movies that people remember fondly that aren't necessarily good because they were gateway horror movies, right? Like they're movies that got people into horror movies. And this is totally a gateway horror film. Obviously, we see it affected a ton of people. So much so that people started to try and find this thing.
We're trying to find it. Yeah, and that's how I felt about Bone Chillers. I'm like, this is so like memorable. Why can't I find this anywhere? Yeah.
And it's such a shame that it's never gotten a release. And I think they maybe missed their window of opportunity. I think, there was a 5-6 year period where this movie really would have sold really well. I think the hype has obviously died down significantly. And that's a shame. I really hope that people can continue to find this movie and give it a shot. I mean, plus there's a cameo from Jim Gaffigan in it before he was like famous.
Fucking Jim Gaffigan is it? And we had a whole moment where we were talking about Jim Gaffigan, which was so funny.
It's just it's fun. It's goofy, it's fun. It doesn't always make the most sense, and maybe a director's commentary would clear that up, so I know exactly.
You don't always need it to make sense, you know.
No, I mean, and that's.
I watch Cursed every year. You don't need it to make sense, baby.
We hope that you enjoyed making us part of your Halloween. To everyone out there who listened to us, thank you. Yeah, anything else, Kat, that we want to talk about with Crybaby Lane, or any other things we talked about for the Halloween season before we bid adieu to our favorite month of the year?
Oh man, well, Halloween never ends. If you never want it to, you can keep going.
It's true.
If I can imbue anything upon anyone, because I know that Halloween can be overwhelming because there's so much you want to do and you're trying to cram so much into it, because Halloween's more about experiences than anything, and I feel like Christmas gets the same vibe about it where you're just so busy all the time. Take this opportunity to take a deep breath, not take everything so seriously, sit down and watch a goofy fucking movie that no one remembers from, well, everyone remembers from 2000. Sit on your couch and just relax and just take it in. Take a deep breath, sit back, and just enjoy that $30 candle that you got. Yankee Candle, and chill. Just chill.
I couldn't say it any better. So with that, everyone, happy Halloween, and until next time.
Till next time, see you in November, losers.